Coogs House. All right, time to start conference play. Y'all ready to do this thing?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach, Parker Ainsworth, here to break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater can stop by, please be sure to subscribe. That way you can get our podcast in your news feed each day. We really appreciate you guys making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Welcome to the YouTube channel if that's how you're finding us. Remember to hit subscribe on that as well. Once we get to 250 subscribers, we're going to be giving away one of these cool Marcus Sasser t-shirts. We are dangerously close to that right now. You're about to make me eat my words. So if you want one of these shirts, Marcus Sasser, it's a vintage graphic t-shirt. Make sure you hit subscribe so we get to 250 subscribers. I think by the time you're listening to this, we might be there. We're dangerously close. Also, be commenting. We're going to be giving away to a commenter. Again, because we're close, we're doing this every 250 subscribers. So if we're, getting that mark and you're not there yet, let's get to 500 and we'll get you one then, right? We'll be doing that thing every 250 subscribers all along the way. If you can't think of something to comment, but you want to be entered in the contest, tell us whether or not what your favorite vegetable is. How about that? All right. So today we're going to be looking at conference basketball. We open up conference play with Tulsa. Tulsa, I think we all have some nasty taste in our mouth regards to Tulsa because of the last regular season football game. However, when we look at the conference basketball slate, it's a little bit different contest we hope for the Cougs. So in the first segment, we look at some of what Tulsa's done this year. Second segment, kind of look at how their guys might match up with Houston. And the third segment, I'm going to tell you why I don't think this game's going to be very, very close. All right, so in the first segment, let's break it down by looking at what all Tulsa has done thus far this season. Admittedly, they've won all of, 4 basketball games, as I'm counting this up. They beat Jackson State from the SWAC. They beat Loyola of Illinois, which is an A-10 school. I actually thought it was a smaller school than that initially. Central Michigan, Mississippi Valley State, a couple teams in this month. And so as I look at this, I'm like, are they getting hot? Does somebody get healthy, et cetera? I think what's interesting here is that, Tulsa, football, I guess some of those guys are transferring out because of the transfer portal. Tulsa's kind of a warm-up in a lot of ways for the Cougs going into conference play. I know we all look at that game from a season ago, and as we go back to that game from a season ago, Houston won a very, very a nail biter, makes it feel closer than it should have been. But Houston won by just 2 points, 66-64. It wasn't conference opener, but in the first game against Tulsa last season, first and only game, if I'm doing my math right here, against Tulsa last season. And so there are some things to take away from how that game went. But if I'm looking at this year's team and this year's results, this year's team is not as good as last year's team for Tulsa. They're scoring just under 70 points a game themselves and giving up almost 72 points a game. Yes, that is math for a below 500 record. They're giving up a lot of 2-point field goals, but running people off the 3-point line. And if I were going to pick out something about them and the way they play defense that worried me as Houston Cougar, I guess it would be that, because we've seen zone, not that Tulsa runs a whole lot of zone, but we've seen zones that kind of, make Houston not get layups because they don't space you out in the same way or whatever. They have someone in that interior paint area. We've seen that kind of give Houston trouble. We've also seen, stretches where if you pack it inside and make Houston shoot over the top and they're just not shooting the ball particularly well, we could be in a little bit of trouble. So as I look at this Tulsa thing, in the game last year, they ran a lot of 3-2 zone. You remember this is the game where Jamal Shed went out with an ankle injury. Sasser and Mark were already hurt, and we rode the Kyler Edwards train. Kyler Edwards, who is now with Detroit's G League affiliate, he had 29 points, went 7 of 15 from 3, and frankly, only one other person, Reggie Chaney, who is still on the roster, had 10 or more points. Shout out to Taze Moore, by the way, who's also doing his thing in the G League. I think he's just the Lakers no, that's Fabian White. Taze Moore's out there playing ball somewhere. Shouts to him. He had 11 rebounds this game a year ago. A big factor in that game was that Houston had 9 blocks. Houston had a 17-point lead at the half and just kind of rode that cushion throughout the entire game. And kind of down the stretch, they got up, 66 to – they got 61 to 50 and kind of like continue to like watch Tulsa chip away, and then the free throw game went haywire and those kinds of things. Houston pulls out a sneaky victory, 66-64. Because I think this Houston team is better, and I think this Tulsa team is worse. Bluntly, I would consider disappointment if this game is that close. And frankly, I'm looking at, like, we'll get more into it in a second, but looking at like common opponents for this Tulsa team. They, for instance, lost to Oral Roberts by 11 points. That's an in-state rivalry for them of sorts. So I guess there might be some sorts of things on the line there, but our Houston Cougars beat that Oral Roberts team by almost 40, and that Oral Roberts team beat this Tulsa team by 11. The transitive property doesn't always work here, but if I'm looking up and down their schedule, they got trounced by Oklahoma State, a Big 12 team. Houston looks to be a Big 12 team this time next year. Their other big Power 5 type of game was a close loss at Oregon State. I think if we look at Oregon State, we'll realize that, like, yes, they're a Power 5 basketball team, but they're a 500-ish team on the season. They're also, like, they barely beat Tulsa. It was the first night of the year. They've since lost to every Power 5 that they've played. And so I would lean more into I would lean more into the Oklahoma State game as like the Tulsa versus Power 5 measurement, and maybe not the Oregon State game. I guess, both OSU, both orange and black, do what you want. So all that is to say that nothing Tulsa has done thus far has me super concerned about how this opening night for Houston's last year in the American Athletic Conference will go. Admittedly, it's a little bittersweet. Like, I've kind of enjoyed being the American Athletic Conference team in the state of Texas. I guess we also have SMU up the road, but this Mustangs, whatever, right? But I also think it's interesting that, like, Houston went into this game with a target on their back, because a lot of, maybe not necessarily Tulsa, but a lot of American Athletic Conference schools were looked over and passed over for the spot in the Big 12 Houston is going to bring. I mean, Houston was picked for a number of different reasons: finances, city, location, etc. Also because they had a growing athletic program and it's kind of showing some like trends in the right direction. But all in all, I think there's going to be a lot of targets on Houston throughout the season, and I guess there could be some gumption in Tulsa going that way. But if I were a betting person, I would be betting on the Cougs to win by 20 plus points in this one. Speaking of betting, betonline.net is your number one source for betting stats, info, news, and analysis. You get the latest odds and trends for every professional amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball and the World Cup. They've got it all at betonline.net. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. I'm not going to keep talking. I talked all over the winter holiday about why you should take the Cougs in their bowl game. We know how that went. So I'm going to also say that you should take, you know what? Let's spice it up. Take TCU in the college football playoff. That's the Big 12. That's where we're going to be next season. Also a state of Texas. I don't know. Should I talk about some diatribe about Sonny Dykes? Anyway, take TCU in the college football playoff. Let's see it right out. Let's go see what Max Duggan has in the tank. Also, just good to see the state of Texas do well. I guess it's not the rivalry that like an SMU or somebody else would be. So take the Horned Frogs. Go Horned Frogs with their hand signal. Yeah, that can't be right. That's a horn. Okay, we'll go with it. Take the Horned Frogs. So if I'm looking at who individually worries me on the Tulsa basketball team, I was surprised to see that they haven't started this kid a lot this season, so I'm going to start with him because he should start. Brandon Betson's a 6'1" guard. He's a really good passer on the break. He's not their point guard in every possession, but it does feel like they kick it to him on like fast break situations, sudden change situations, etc., following turnovers or long rebounds. And he's really, really good at passing the ball on the break and good with the ball in traffic. And so I'm surprised they don't use him more as a traditional point guard in the half court settings. I don't coach them, right? That's Eric Kunkel. That's not my job. But I think he's interesting to watch in that instance. He's a 6'1" guard, so not like an overpowering size guy. And he doesn't have the speed of Shed or Sasser. So I'm not sure that he's going to beat anybody on the bounce in that sense, but he's just crafty and he's good at what he does. He also shoots, I believe I got down here, 46% from three. Since he's got crazy high attempts per game on the season, but there's been some games where he shoots 10 and some games where he shoots none. And so that's kind of balanced him out being around the 5 mark, right? That's how an average works. But that's pretty high volume and pretty high percentage for a guy too. So while he doesn't start for them, I'm starting with Brandon Benson because if I'm Houston Cougar defense, I imagine it's a guy that gets, when he's in the game, the Jamal Shed matchup, right? Trying to take him off of out of the flow of the offense. Also was really impressed by Sam Griffin, a 6'3" guard, has a little bit more size in his shoulders as far as getting downhill goes. I looked for him to get more attacking, get hands in the glass type of layups and stuff. He does shoot 34% from three as well. Decent amount of attempts per game, and he's a more consistent attempts per game person. So I'd look out for that if I'm scouting these guys as far as like things that can kind of get them going. Anthony Pritchard is a do-right kid. He's only averaging like 7.5 points per game. He's a lengthy 6'3". I can't find his wingspan anymore online in my research here, but it looks like he's got pretty long positive wingspan. He also gets the ball a lot more in traffic on the break than he does in the half court as far as creation kind of stuff goes. But on the whole, I was impressed by what I saw out of Anthony Pritchard. I pulled up highlights and stuff from the Detroit Mercy game, the Oklahoma State games, and in both instances, I thought that like he seemed the most confident. Most confident in both games, but against Oklahoma State, he was not like weathered or worried by the playing in Stillwater, Oklahoma, in a big environment. This game is happening over the holidays from school, so I don't know how many students there will be in attendance at the Houston and Tulsa basketball game, but I do think it's worth pointing out that, frankly, the city of Houston, this is a for the city basketball team, could be filling out, and Pritchard seems like a kind of guy that like is not going to be deterred by a loud crowd in the Fertitta Center, or anywhere, I should say. So I guess I say in the Fertitta Center, this was actually the matchup happening up there. Whoops. But I do think that he's the kind of guy that if he's unbothered on the road is going to be fairly confident playing a top 5 team in the country. Bryant Salabunge is their big man. He is a long 6'9", and admittedly, our big men are also about 6'8", 6'9". He seems to be kind of the all their half-court sets tend to involve him getting the ball in some form or fashion. He's the hockey assist, the assist, the score itself. He is somehow involved in all of their sets. They do a really good job of running what you'd call a pistol action in the NBA, where they have a dribble handoff between a guard and a wing, and they have a postman, in this case, Salabunge, who either on the block at the 15-foot mark or in the spread basketball team with like a true 5-out kind of look, all the way up, involved in a double screen out of the 3-point line. He kind of operates more in that like 10-ish feet area. So he gets involved in the handoffs and screens and things like that. He's a rim runner and roller, but basically his job is to attack them really, really hard and gather up the defense to then spit the ball out. Again, he's not a crazy high assist guy himself. Based on my marks here, he's getting about an assist a game. But what he is he gets the ball, punctures the defense, attacks the rim, either on lobs or running without the ball or whatever, and then forces defensive rotations. And then they find someone else. We mentioned a couple guys that shoot well over national averages from 3-point land. That's really, really important here when you factor in the fact that they got a guy that's a constant rim threat in Salabunge. When he gets the ball in that block and he's not a rim runner, he's not like running at the basket for a lob. I look at his right hook the same way that other teams look at J1 Roberts' left hook. He's going to try and get back to putting his left shoulder in the defense and separating. And then he's got that like width of his own shoulder separation plus the long arm over the top. J1 Roberts is an expert that's going left. And I think going left actually does throw defenses a little bit. Even when they're ready for it, there's like an instinct you got to be prepared for it. But so the Bungay does very effectively go over his left shoulder to the right hand. Nothing I don't think I'm worried about with Chaney or Roberts or any big, really, even JV or Francis. We'll see if we get a small lineup with Jarace Walker out there or not. But I do think as a whole that that's going to be kind of the spot that they look to attack because unlike other games, unlike Oklahoma State, for instance, as far as playing good teams go, if you're Tulsa, they're 6'9", we're 6'9", right? At Oklahoma State, Tulsa 6'9" was playing against a 6'11" and change, right? When you play other big Power 5 programs, we're not quite a Power 5 program officially yet, I guess, but when you play against those teams, you don't think you're going to have that kind of a size advantage. And they do, so I wonder, or not advantage, but like they're on equal footing, and so I wanted to go that direction. Also, they could go on that block away from Jarace Walker, attacking J1 Roberts and kind of get more of a one-on-one matchup because they can use if he's got that hook, he can use the rim kind of keep Jarace Walker away from getting to defend the shots. I feel like as a Houston show, we got to point out that Tulsa's got two kids from Katy. Brian Knight went to Tompkins High School. Charles Chukwu went to Pato High School, both in Katy. They also have Josiah McWright, who went to Cy Falls. So, shout outs to them. Hope we can see them in the game. That's 3 freshmen. So we'll see. Well, we'll see how this season goes for Tulsa basketball. And if anything like Tulsa football, they'll upset someone at the end of the season, then see other guys go to the transfer portal. That said, I'm not too worried about that upset being Houston. So let's break down why that is. In looking at how they attack Houston this season and last, they seem to really slow Houston down with zone last season, especially on the stretch when Houston got up 66-55 with about 3 minutes left. The zone led to a bunch of bad shots and turnovers out of the Houston Cougars. They continue to play the zone this year defensively as a primary defensive tactic. Last year they played Houston in primarily a 3-2 zone or an odd front looking zone. This year they've had a number of different looks as I've watched through clips of a handful of different games. So I would imagine you're going to see more zone against Houston this year because teams in the American Athletic Conference are probably going to have trouble athletically. But also, if you're looking at like times Houston has struggled to score the basketball, it's been because teams are daring Houston to shoot and just hoping Houston misses. And while Houston's got a couple of good shooters, they don't have the kind of team shooting that's going to make someone pay for doing that. And so I'd imagine we see that as well. Now, when I see what Kyler Edwards did in rewatching last year's game, again, 7 for 15 for the 3-point line and kind of helped Houston build up that big lead super early. Can Marcus Sasser do that? Oh, yes, he can. Right? Like Marcus Sasser can only do that. Kyler Edwards got a lot of his off of pin down screens and screens in the zone and ball movement. Sasser can get his off the bounce too. Right? And so I'm not so worried about that. We also saw Tremont Mark at various points of important games this season knock down important 3-point field goals. We didn't get to see that last year. Tremont Mark was hurt. As far as like defensive pressure Houston will apply to Tulsa, I mentioned a couple of different guards. Pick your poison as far as which one gets Jamal Shed. But last year, Jamal Shed rolls his ankle early and misses the rest of the basketball game. This year, knock on wood, I think we'll be okay there. We have Jamal Shed up in someone's jersey all over again. There's also kind of game where I could see Terrence Arsenault and Emmanuel Sharp getting some early run because they're going to sit in the zone. We saw what Terrence Arsenault did to Oregon's zone as his own buster. Sampson has said as much himself that he felt like Terrence Arsenault played a lot better against Oregon versus St. Mary's or Alabama because they ran a zone and he just had to find space and shoot threes. And that kind of played more into his hand. And then on defense, he was not outmatched athletically. This reads like that kind of a game as well. And so I could see Terrence Arceneaux getting used early and often, especially the jump shots falling, because he has shown again that he has an ability to do that against these kind of zone teams, and he might be that zone buster. And then you've listened to me a lot at this point. You know I love Emmanuel Sharp and the confidence he walks on the floor with, the redshirt freshman that really didn't get a redshirt year because of his injury. I feel like he's the kind of guy, he's going to come off the bench thinking he's the microwave. He's going to shoot 3 threes in his first 5 minutes in the basketball game because they're running a zone and that's what's open. And if he makes 2 or 3 of them, we got to keep that thing rolling. Like, I think he's that kind of a guy. He knows how to score the basketball. He's got a lot of growth to do defensively, and he's in a really crowded backcourt in Houston. But when they play zone, I got to see 5 Emmanuel Sharp and see if it's hot or not, right? And I think Houston will do that as well. The thing Houston did get is Virginia that I think that they can translate into this as well. The way to beat a zone is, if you're trying to be honest, everyone thinks to shoot over the top of it because that's the shots that they give you. And I think that's super fair. If you can shoot over the top of it, they have to get out of it because zones are made to give up long jump shots. And if you're going to make your long jump shots, they're screwed. But the way to really beat a zone is to get to the nail, right? The nail in the middle of the free throw line is kind of like the thing about like the jugular of the zone. It's the middle, it's the vulnerable spot. You have all these things set up to protect it and whatnot. But like, you can get the ball there, the zone has to collapse. All 10 eyes are looking at the ball at the nail. That's when you get back cuts for layups. That's when you get lobs for dunks in the high-low. That's when you get easy kick-out open threes. That's when you get dribble drive penetration and all kinds of guys. The dribble drive penetration sucks up the defense inside 5 feet. You get a 10-foot jump shot because on a kick-out. Like, all those kinds of things happen once you get the high-low action. We've seen Houston go to high-low fairly effectively with Jarace Walker and J1 Roberts running that nail spot. I also like that they got Tremont Markin involved in a little bit in the past. So we got some positional diversity there. But I think the other thing there is that the low man has been so good at catching the ball, turning into points with J1 Roberts, Reggie Chaney, or Javier Francis. I bet Javier Francis's length makes him an important aspect in this game, or important aspect of this game. And so I could see the same kind of high-low happening there as well. I think that what you'll see, though, is that screening the zone leading to a short roll to the nail. We saw those kinds of things open up some in the Virginia game. A lot of it for Jarace Walker. And then in doing that, suddenly, ba-bang, right? You've got this opening there in the cup because they have to suck up whatever they're doing to the nail. And that's how, if I'm Sampson, we know we can get the threes, right? We know we can get the threes in rotation. That's what the zone is meant to give up. But if we can get to the nail like we've done against teams the last couple of weeks, suddenly things are looking a little bit different. If you're watching the game and think something else is looking a little bit different, make sure you follow me at Painsworth512, PAINSWORTH 512 on Instagram, Twitter. I have a TikTok. I never post one. Be real. All of the things. Find me at Painsworth512 on all the things. We'll talk Cougs. If the game gets boring, we'll talk Rockets, Astros, Texans, whatever you like. I got a wall of sneakers behind me. We can talk about those as well. Tell me what you got for Christmas or whatever if you want to. All of that stuff at Painsworth512, PAINSWORTH 512. That's where you can talk to me about all of the things. I'll also be posting Locked On Cougs there each and every day. If you're looking for a second listen of the day, I'm going to recommend Locked On Rockets. He does a really great job of breaking down more X's and O's stuff. When he brings on a guy named Ali Khan. Ali Khan's a great guest to have because he's so good at diagnosing X's and O's in the NBA. So make sure to check out Locked On Rockets, the show that Jackson Gatlett's kind of going on, especially the episodes that's got Ali Khan on as well. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. Make sure you subscribe and download each and every day. Make sure you make Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Locked On Cougs, primarily Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Go Cougs.